Have you ever stopped in the middle of a meal and wondered if the way you be eating could actually harm your brain or increase your risk of cancer? Most of us never think that something as simple as pairing one food with another could matter. But what if I told you that the way you combine tomatoes with certain ingredients might change whether they protect your health or slowly chip away at it? It sounds dramatic, but stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know which combinations to avoid, which ones to enjoy freely, and you'll even get 3 of the best and worst recipes backed by real science. That's your reward for watching all the way through. Practical, research-based tips you can start using today, not just vague warnings. Tomatoes are one of the most popular foods in the world. We eat them raw in salads, cooked in sauces, and blended into juices. They're rich in vitamin C, potassium, folate, and fiber. More importantly, they're loaded with lycopene, a powerful antioxidant that gives them their red color. Decades of research show that lycopene can help protect cells from damage and may lower the risk of heart disease and some cancers. In fact, large studies have linked higher lycopene levels in the blood with better overall health outcomes. So at first glance, it might seem impossible that the same food could ever pose a risk. But here's where things get interesting. While the tomato itself is not the problem, the company it keeps on your plate can make a big difference. For example, when researchers look at dietary patterns connected with cancer or dementia, the culprits are usually processed foods high in salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats. Combine tomatoes with bacon, sausage, or heavily fried items, and you change the picture. The tomato's benefits don't disappear, but they can be overshadowed by the damaging effects of its partner. Studies consistently show that diets rich in processed meats increase the risk of certain cancers. Excess salt and preservatives can contribute to high blood pressure, which is a known risk factor for both stroke and dementia. So the danger isn't the tomato. It's what you decide to mix it with. Now, think about how often you've seen tomato sauces sold in jars or cans that are loaded with sugar and sodium. This is another hidden trap. A spoonful of fresh tomato soup could be protective, but that same soup with added sugar and salt becomes part of the problem. High sugar intake fuels inflammation, and inflammation is linked to accelerated aging in the brain. High sodium, on the other hand, raises blood pressure and puts strain on your blood vessels, again, raising dementia risk. These are not myths. They're findings supported by well-established research in nutrition and epidemiology. At the same time, science has shown us that combining tomatoes with the right foods can supercharge their benefits. When you cook tomatoes and pair them with healthy fats like olive oil, your body absorbs more lycopene. That's one reason Mediterranean diets are repeatedly linked to lower risks of cancer, heart disease, and cognitive decline. So it's not just about avoiding bad combos. It's also about choosing the best ones. And that's exactly why this video matters, because once you understand the why behind these combinations, you gain control over your health in a very real way. By the time we're done, you'll not only know the worst mistakes people make with tomatoes, but also have 3 clear science-backed recipes that boost brain health, protect your heart, and help shield you from chronic disease. So stick with me until the end, because the knowledge you gain today could genuinely change how you cook tomorrow. And it might even change the way you age in the years ahead. Tomatoes are one of the most researched foods in the world, and for good reason. They are packed with compounds that have measurable effects on human health. Lycopene, which is the carotenoid pigment responsible for their vibrant red color, has been studied for its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Antioxidants work by neutralizing free radicals, unstable molecules that can damage DNA and trigger processes that lead to cancer and neurodegeneration. Multiple population studies have observed that people with higher lycopene levels in their blood tend to have lower risks of prostate, lung, and stomach cancers. While this does not prove that tomatoes alone prevent disease, it shows that they can play an important role in a protective dietary pattern. Vitamin C, potassium, folate, and fiber all add to this protective effect. Vitamin C strengthens the immune system and helps repair tissues. Potassium supports healthy blood pressure and nerve function. Folate contributes to brain health and prevents DNA damage during cell division. Fiber improves digestion and helps regulate blood sugar. When combined, these nutrients create a synergy that is greater than the sum of its parts. This is why tomatoes appear in dietary guidelines around the world as a cornerstone of a balanced diet. However, it is not enough to know that tomatoes are healthy. It is equally important to understand how preparation and pairing affect their benefits. When eaten raw, tomatoes provide vitamin C and other water-soluble compounds, but cooking them unlocks more lycopene. Heat changes the structure of lycopene into a form that is easier for the body to absorb. Research shows that tomato paste, cooked tomatoes, and sauces made with olive oil can significantly raise lycopene levels in the blood compared to raw tomatoes alone. This means that a homemade pasta sauce with a drizzle of olive oil is not just delicious, but also a powerful health booster. The flip side is that many commercial tomato products lose their value by being overloaded with sugar, salt, and preservatives. A jar of store-bought pasta sauce can contain as much sugar as a candy bar and more sodium than a bag of chips. Excess sugar promotes chronic inflammation, a process linked with cancer and dementia. High sodium intake is directly associated with elevated blood pressure, which damages blood vessels and reduces blood flow to the brain. Over time, this contributes to cognitive decline and increases the likelihood of dementia. So the same tomato that could protect your health in one recipe can contribute to harm if drowned in processed ingredients. Another important factor is the company tomatoes keep on your plate. Scientific evidence is clear that diets rich in processed meats, like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, and pepperoni, are linked with higher cancer risks, especially colorectal cancer. The World Health Organization has classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning there is strong evidence that it causes cancer. When tomatoes are paired with these meats, as in a pizza covered with pepperoni or a pasta dish with bacon, the antioxidant power of the tomato cannot outweigh the damage caused by the processed meat. In fact, studies show that nitrites and other preservatives used in processed meats form harmful compounds in the body that can lead to DNA damage. Combining a healthy ingredient with a harmful one does not cancel out the risk. It simply adds complexity to the meal without removing the danger. The same logic applies to fried foods. Frying tomatoes in unhealthy oils or alongside heavily battered items adds trans fats and oxidized compounds that damage cells and fuel inflammation. Over time, inflammation is a driver of both cancer and dementia. That is why dietary patterns like the Mediterranean diet, which emphasize olive oil, nuts, vegetables, fish, and legumes, are consistently shown to protect against these diseases. Tomatoes fit naturally into this pattern, but only when paired with the right companions. There are also subtler concerns. Some people may experience sensitivity to nightshade vegetables, the plant family that includes tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes. For a small percentage of people with autoimmune conditions, these foods can trigger inflammation. However, for the vast majority of people, tomatoes are not harmful and are in fact beneficial. It is important to distinguish between rare individual sensitivities and broad health recommendations based on large studies. Broadly speaking, science supports tomatoes as protective rather than harmful. The real danger lies in myths that confuse or scare people, claims that eating tomatoes with dairy directly causes dementia, or that combining them with sugar instantly leads to cancer have no scientific basis. What research shows instead is that chronic patterns of poor diet, high in processed meats, added sugars, and unhealthy fats, create conditions in the body that make cancer and dementia more likely over time. Tomatoes in these meals are not the cause of the disease, but they are often used in ways that dilute or overshadow their natural benefits. It is not the tomato that is guilty, it is the overall pattern of unhealthy combinations that should be avoided. This is why context matters so much. If you sit down to a meal of fresh tomatoes drizzled with olive oil, sprinkled with herbs, and served alongside leafy greens, you are eating in a way that research links to longer life and sharper memory. If, on the other hand, you consume tomatoes smothered in sugar, fried in damaged oils, or paired with processed meats, you are increasing your risk of disease, not because of the tomato, but because of what surrounds it. Understanding this distinction empowers you to use tomatoes the way they are meant to be used, as a shield against disease rather than an accessory to it. Conclusion and call to action. When we look closely at how food affects the body, the evidence is clear that what we combine matters just as much as what we choose. Tomatoes on their own are a nutritional powerhouse, but the moment they are mixed with the wrong partners, the health balance shifts. To understand this better, it helps to look at the two conditions that worry most people, cancer and dementia. These are complex diseases, influenced by many factors, but diet plays a central role, and tomatoes often sit right in the middle of the conversation. Cancer develops when cells grow uncontrollably and fail to die at the proper time. Over the years, studies have shown that oxidative stress and chronic inflammation are two of the biggest drivers behind this uncontrolled growth. Tomatoes, rich in antioxidants like lycopene and vitamin C, can help reduce oxidative stress and calm inflammation. This is why higher tomato consumption has been linked with lower risks of certain cancers in observational studies. But when tomatoes are paired with processed meats such as bacon, hot dogs, or deli slices, things change. The World Health Organization has officially classified processed meats as carcinogenic. This means they contain compounds that directly increase cancer risk, such as nitrosamines, which are formed during processing. Adding tomatoes to these foods does not neutralize their harmful compounds. Instead, the tomato is trapped in a meal where the damaging agents dominate. That's why eating pizza covered in processed meats or pasta dripping with heavy cured meat sauces can tilt the balance toward harm despite the tomato's natural benefits. Dementia, on the other hand, is a progressive decline in memory and thinking abilities. Research into its causes highlights chronic inflammation, vascular damage, and oxidative stress as key players. Again, tomatoes should be protective here because their antioxidants can limit the oxidative damage that leads to brain cell injury. Studies of Mediterranean and plant-based diets show strong associations with lower dementia risk, and tomatoes are always part of these eating patterns. But when tomatoes are eaten alongside foods high in trans fats, refined sugar, or excess sodium, their benefits shrink. High sugar diets fuel systemic inflammation, while excess salt raises blood pressure and reduces blood flow to the brain. Poor circulation means fewer nutrients and less oxygen reach brain tissue, which accelerates cognitive decline. So while the tomato is not the problem, unhealthy food partners create an environment where dementia is more likely to develop, and the tomato cannot cancel out those risks. It is easy to see why myths about tomatoes arise. People notice that tomato sauces are often served with heavy meats, salty cheeses, or fried foods, and they assume the tomato must somehow be the guilty part of the meal. In reality, it is the additives and processing in the other foods that create harm. Tomatoes simply happen to appear in both the best and worst dietary patterns, which makes them an easy scapegoat. This is why it is so important to separate myth from evidence. No high-quality research has ever shown that tomatoes combined with a specific food directly cause cancer or dementia. What research does show is that tomatoes can lose their protective effect when they are buried in recipes full of harmful ingredients. One of the most fascinating discoveries about tomatoes is that their protective power can actually be enhanced with the right combinations. Cooking tomatoes increases the availability of lycopene, and when paired with a healthy fat like extra virgin olive oil, absorption improves even further. This is why Mediterranean dishes such as tomato salads drizzled with olive oil or slow-cooked tomato sauces appear so frequently in studies linking diet to lower risks of chronic disease. It is not just about eating a tomato, but about how you prepare and enjoy it. The science of food synergy, where nutrients from different ingredients interact to boost health, is clear in this case. A simple drizzle of olive oil over roasted tomatoes can transform an already healthy food into something even more protective for your cells and your brain. This duality of tomatoes, the way they can either protect or lose their strength depending on the company they keep, teaches us a broader lesson about nutrition. No single food determines health on its own. It is the pattern, the combination, and the context that decide whether a meal becomes medicine or a slow burden on the body. If you enjoy tomatoes in their fresh, unprocessed form, paired with herbs, vegetables, legumes, and healthy oils, you are aligning yourself with the strongest scientific evidence for disease prevention. If you eat them mostly in the form of sugary ketchup, salty canned soups, or greasy fast food toppings, then you are exposing yourself to the very risks you are hoping to avoid. This perspective can be empowering rather than frightening. Instead of fearing tomatoes or worrying about whether a single recipe might cause harm, the focus should be on building meals that allow their natural power to shine. By avoiding harmful pairings and embracing beneficial ones, you tip the balance toward protection. Cancer and dementia are not the result of one food choice. They are the outcome of years of patterns. Tomatoes can play a central role in those patterns, but only if we use them wisely. Conclusion and call to action. If we follow the trail of evidence further, the story of tomatoes and their connection to long-term health becomes even clearer. Tomatoes are not miracle foods, but they are also not silent bystanders. They play an active role in the network of nutrients that protect the body from disease. When scientists study dietary patterns in populations that live longer in age, with fewer chronic illnesses, tomatoes consistently appear as part of the picture. Mediterranean regions, for example, are famous for their use of tomatoes in salads, soups, and sauces. These are not isolated dishes, but pieces of a broader lifestyle built around whole foods, plant-based meals, healthy fats, and minimal processing. The result is a pattern of eating that reduces oxidative stress, protects the blood vessels, and supports brain function. At the cellular level, the compounds in tomatoes interact with our body in measurable ways. Lycopene, for instance, is stored in fatty tissues and accumulates in organs such as the liver, adrenal glands, and even the brain. Research shows that people with higher levels of lycopene in their tissues tend to have lower markers of oxidative damage. This matters because oxidative damage to DNA and proteins is one of the earliest steps in cancer development. The same oxidative stress also affects neurons, the cells responsible for memory and thinking, making it a driver of dementia. Tomatoes, through their antioxidants, can help counteract this stress. But once again, this protection can only work if the surrounding diet does not continuously add to the burden through harmful foods. It is also worth noting that tomatoes contribute to vascular health in ways that go beyond antioxidants. They contain potassium, which helps regulate blood pressure. High blood pressure is one of the strongest and most consistent risk factors for both stroke and dementia. Keeping blood pressure within a healthy range reduces the strain on arteries and ensures steady blood flow to the brain. In this way, a diet rich in potassium-containing foods like tomatoes, bananas, and leafy greens is protective at multiple levels. But if these foods are eaten alongside excessive salt or highly processed meals, the benefit is weakened. Too much sodium counteracts potassium's effect, and the result is often elevated blood pressure. This is why processed tomato soups or sauces loaded with salt may give the impression of being healthy while quietly increasing risk. Understanding this balance helps separate fact from fiction. It is not correct to say that a tomato combined with one particular food will directly cause cancer or dementia. That kind of claim oversimplifies complex science and spreads unnecessary fear. What is accurate to say is that tomatoes can lose their protective value when combined with foods known to be harmful, such as processed meats, trans fats, or sugary additives. Over time, meals built on these combinations can create an internal environment that favors disease rather than health. It is a slow process, often unfolding over decades, but it is measurable and well documented in research. One of the most powerful lessons from nutrition science is that positive effects multiply when foods are combined well. This is why olive oil and tomatoes work so beautifully together. Fat-soluble compounds like lycopene need fat to be absorbed efficiently. Without it, much of the lycopene passes through the body unused. Pairing tomatoes with a drizzle of healthy fat not only makes the dish tastier, but also ensures your body actually benefits from the nutrients. Similarly, combining tomatoes with green vegetables adds extra vitamins, minerals, and fiber, creating a complete nutrient profile that supports digestion, immunity, and brain health all at once. On the other hand, negative effects also multiply when poor combinations dominate. A tomato slice on a burger stacked with processed cheese and fried bacon does not undo the harms of those ingredients. The nitrites in processed meats, the saturated fat in excess cheese, and the trans fats in fried oils all accelerate inflammation and oxidative stress. The tomato is still nutritious, but it is overshadowed by stronger forces working in the opposite direction. This is why people often feel confused, wondering if a tomato is good or bad. The answer is that it depends on the company it keeps. This reality should not discourage anyone from eating tomatoes. Instead, it should encourage smarter choices. Every meal is an opportunity to either strengthen your body's defenses or weaken them. Choosing fresh tomatoes, pairing them with clean proteins like legumes or fish, and preparing them with healthy oils and herbs means you are using food as medicine. Choosing tomatoes only in processed, sugary, or salty forms means you are missing out on their true potential. The decision is not complicated, but it does require awareness. When myths spread online about tomatoes being dangerous when combined with dairy, sugar, or other ingredients, the real danger is not the tomato, but the misinformation itself. These claims distract from the actual well-documented risks of processed meats, refined sugars, and poor quality oils. By focusing attention on the wrong target, they prevent people from making the changes that really matter. The truth is simple and powerful. Tomatoes are protective, but they cannot save you from the damage caused by consistently harmful choices. Knowing this gives you the clarity to focus on what actually works, so your meals protect your health instead of silently harming it. Conclusion and call to action: tomatoes show us one of the clearest examples of how nutrition depends on context. When you strip them down to their natural form, they are almost entirely protective. Yet when you place them in unhealthy settings, the message gets twisted, and that is where confusion spreads. It helps to think of the body as a system that constantly tries to balance damage with repair. Every meal you eat can tip the scale in one direction or the other. If your plate is filled with foods that fuel damage, like processed meats, fried oils, or excessive sugar, the body must fight harder just to stay balanced. If your plate is filled with foods that fuel repair, like fresh tomatoes, leafy greens, whole grains, and nuts, then the body is supported instead of strained. The reason tomatoes become such a point of debate is because they are often present in both types of meals, leaving people to wrongly assume the tomato is the cause of harm rather than the victim of a poor combination. Scientific studies continue to show that it is not single foods that drive disease, but overall dietary patterns. For example, people who follow diets rich in fruits, vegetables, legumes, fish, and olive oil consistently show lower risks of cancer and dementia. Tomatoes are simply one part of this pattern, contributing antioxidants, fiber, and micronutrients that fit into the broader puzzle. When researchers track blood levels of lycopene, they find that those with higher concentrations tend to have lower risks of chronic disease. These measurements confirm that tomatoes are not just passing through the body without effect, they are actively influencing health at a cellular level. The key is ensuring that these beneficial compounds are not drowned out by harmful factors. Take dementia as a case in point. The brain is highly sensitive to blood flow, oxidative stress, and inflammation. Anything that restricts blood circulation or increases cellular damage raises the risk of memory loss and cognitive decline. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, and uncontrolled blood sugar are some of the strongest predictors of dementia, and all of them are tied to diet. Tomatoes alone cannot erase these risks, but they can be part of the protective side of the equation. Their potassium helps control blood pressure, their antioxidants help protect brain cells, and their fiber supports steady blood sugar levels. However, if the same tomatoes are eaten with foods that push blood pressure up, spike blood sugar, or fill the bloodstream with unhealthy fats, then the brain is still under assault. This is why a salad with fresh tomatoes, olive oil, and beans supports memory health, while a fast food burger with a tomato slice does not. The story is much the same with cancer. Tumors often develop in environments where oxidative stress and inflammation are left unchecked. Antioxidants from tomatoes can help reduce this environment, but not if they are constantly fighting against carcinogenic compounds from processed meats, charred foods, or chemical additives. Studies on populations with high intake of processed meat consistently show increased cancer rates even when those same meals contain tomatoes or other vegetables. The lesson is clear: you cannot sprinkle a healthy food on top of a harmful one and expect protection. The body does not work that way. What works is creating meals where every component contributes to repair rather than damage. It is also important to remember how preparation methods matter. Frying tomatoes at very high heat in unstable oils produces oxidized compounds that contribute to inflammation. Baking or slow roasting them with olive oil, on the other hand, enhances lycopene availability and keeps the protective fats intact. This is why traditional cuisines that rely on slow cooking often provide more health benefits than fast food versions of similar ingredients. The science supports what culture has long practiced. Careful preparation magnifies health, while careless preparation diminishes it. This is where myths about tomatoes become particularly damaging. By focusing fear on the tomato itself, people are distracted from the real issues: the processed meats, the hidden sugars, the harmful oils. No credible study shows that a tomato paired with a specific single food directly triggers cancer or dementia. What studies do show over and over again is that harmful eating patterns filled with processed and fried foods raise the risk of disease, while patterns filled with whole, fresh, and minimally processed foods reduce it. Tomatoes simply reflect whichever environment they are placed in. If that environment is harmful, they lose their power. If it is healthy, they strengthen it. So the real choice comes down to this: will you let tomatoes be trapped in meals that damage you, or will you free them to do the work they are designed to do? The answer is in your hands every time you cook, every time you shop, and every time you sit down to eat. A single meal may feel small, but repeated over months and years, it shapes your future health in ways that are impossible to ignore. Tomatoes can be a cornerstone of that future, but only if you choose to let them stand with allies rather than enemies on your plate. Conclusion and call to action. When you start to view food as a system, the role of tomatoes becomes even more fascinating. They are not isolated ingredients, but participants in a larger orchestra of nutrients, each one playing its part. Think of them as a steady violin in a symphony, not always loud, but always important in holding the harmony together. If you pair them with other instruments of health, like green vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and olive oil, the music becomes powerful and protective. But if you drown them out with the blaring noise of processed meats, fried oils, or refined sugars, their contribution is lost. Health is not about a single note. It is about the quality of the whole song you are feeding your body day after day. This is why long-term studies emphasize dietary patterns rather than single foods. People who thrive into their 80s and 90s without major illness are not those who avoided tomatoes, but those who consistently built meals from fresh, nutrient-dense ingredients. In these groups, tomatoes appear not as villains but as allies. They are mixed into vegetable stews, tossed into salads, slow-cooked into soups, or layered into whole grain dishes. These uses unlock their full nutritional potential because they are surrounded by foods that amplify, not cancel, their strengths. It is no accident that these populations show lower rates of cancer and dementia. Their plates reflect a lifetime of combinations that tilt the balance toward protection instead of harm. At the same time, tomatoes reveal the danger of modern food habits. In many places, the most common way people eat tomatoes is not fresh but processed, squeezed into ketchup, preserved in canned soups, or blended into fast food sauces. These versions are often loaded with hidden sugars, sodium, and artificial stabilizers. The tomato is still there, but its benefits are overshadowed by the additives. A tablespoon of ketchup may contain more sugar than a small piece of candy, and a serving of canned soup can deliver a third of your daily salt allowance. Over time, these habits create the exact conditions: high blood pressure, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, that set the stage for cancer and dementia. The tomato, once again, is not the culprit. It is the disguise under which harmful ingredients sneak into the body. When you strip away these layers and return to the essence of the tomato, its power becomes clear. The lycopene it holds is more than just a pigment. It is a compound that interacts with free radicals in your body, neutralizing them before they can damage your DNA. Damaged DNA is one of the earliest signals of cancer development. Neutralizing those radicals is like repairing cracks in a foundation before the whole structure collapses. This is not speculation. Laboratory studies and human trials have shown that higher lycopene intake correlates with reduced markers of oxidative stress. At the same time, lycopene has been found in the brain, where it helps protect neurons from the same type of stress that leads to dementia. The tomato may not be the loudest or flashiest food, but it is steady in its defense when given the chance. This steady defense is enhanced by cooking methods that unlock lycopene's potential. Boiling, roasting, or stewing tomatoes in olive oil makes the nutrient more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb and use it more effectively. This explains why traditional dishes like tomato-based stews or Mediterranean sauces provide measurable health benefits. They are not just delicious cultural staples, they are practical applications of food science long before the science was written down. Generations cooked this way because it worked, and modern research now confirms that it truly does. Contrast this with frying tomatoes in unstable oils, which creates harmful compounds that overpower the benefits, or drowning them in sugar and preservatives, which shifts the meal from protective to destructive. Each preparation is a choice, and each choice either strengthens or weakens your defenses. If you begin to see cooking not as a chore, but as a form of daily medicine, the importance of these small decisions becomes clear. A tomato salad prepared at home with fresh herbs and olive oil has a completely different impact on your body than a tomato-based sauce from a jar that has been sitting on a shelf for months. The first supports your health, the second undermines it. So when we ask whether tomatoes cause harm or prevent it, the real answer is found in these details. They are a reflection of your overall habits. They can be the face of a lifestyle that defends you against chronic disease, or they can be reduced to an accessory in meals that quietly erode your health. The choice is yours, and the evidence shows it clearly. Use them wisely, and they stand as one of the simplest, most powerful tools in your kitchen for building resilience against cancer and dementia. Use them poorly, and their power fades into the background of a diet that does more harm than good. Conclusion and call to action. The deeper we look at the role of tomatoes in human health, the more we see how they serve as a mirror of the choices we make every day. They are neither a magical cure nor a hidden poison. They simply amplify the environment in which they are placed. If that environment is filled with wholesome foods, they become part of a powerful defense against disease. If that environment is dominated by processed ingredients, harmful fats, and excess sugar, they are dragged down into that same destructive current. This is why separating fact from fiction is so important. People are quick to point fingers at single foods, but the truth is always more nuanced and far more empowering once you understand it. One of the strongest lessons science teaches us about tomatoes is how they interact with the human body over time. It is not just about what happens after one meal, but what happens after years of repeated choices. When tomatoes are eaten regularly in healthy combinations, the benefits accumulate. Lycopene levels rise in the blood and tissues, protecting cells from ongoing oxidative damage. Blood pressure is supported by the potassium they provide. Inflammation markers can be reduced thanks to their antioxidants and phytonutrients. These are small but steady advantages that, when added up over decades, make the difference between resilience and vulnerability. But the reverse is also true. If tomatoes are mostly in unhealthy contexts, like sugary sauces or salty processed dishes, the protective edge is dulled. The damage from the other ingredients builds faster than the tomato can protect, and the result is not protection but progression toward disease. This is especially critical when thinking about dementia. The brain is uniquely sensitive to nutritional choices. It is the organ that consumes the most energy and requires constant blood flow, oxygen, and nutrient delivery. Any disruption in those systems increases the risk of decline. Diets high in vegetables, fruits, and healthy fats support these systems, while diets high in processed foods compromise them. Tomatoes fit into the supportive side because of their antioxidants, fiber, and potassium. They may not stop dementia on their own, but they help build the conditions that keep the brain healthier for longer. When eaten with protective companions like olive oil, leafy greens, nuts, and legumes, their effect is magnified. When eaten with processed meats, fried foods, and sugary sauces, their effect is minimized. This contrast highlights the power of choice. Every meal is an opportunity to either nourish or neglect the brain. Cancer risk follows a similar story. Tomatoes contain compounds that defend against DNA damage, one of the earliest triggers of tumor growth. Their antioxidants act like shields, intercepting free radicals before they can cause harm. Studies suggest that populations with higher tomato intake, especially cooked tomatoes, may have lower rates of certain cancers, including prostate cancer. Yet this protection is weakened if the same diet is filled with known carcinogens. Processed meats, charred foods, and high-salt items have all been linked to increased cancer risk. Adding tomatoes to them does not erase the risk. The science is clear: you cannot use one protective food to cancel out several harmful ones. The only way to gain the full benefit is to build meals where the majority of ingredients are working for your health, not against it. This balance extends into everyday habits most people never think twice about. Consider a simple choice like pasta sauce. A homemade sauce made from fresh tomatoes, garlic, onions, olive oil, and herbs is loaded with antioxidants and beneficial compounds. A store-bought jar, on the other hand, might contain large amounts of sugar, salt, and preservatives. Both contain tomatoes, but their effects on the body are completely different. One supports health and longevity, while the other silently contributes to inflammation, high blood pressure, and poor metabolic health. The lesson is not to fear tomatoes, but to respect the way they are prepared and combined. The good news is that it does not take extreme effort to make the better choice. Preparing fresh tomato dishes at home is simple and cost-effective. Even small swaps, like choosing olive oil instead of refined vegetable oil, or adding beans and greens instead of processed meats, can transform the impact of a meal. Science shows that incremental changes add up. A diet does not need to be perfect, but the overall direction matters. If most of your meals place tomatoes in healthy contexts, the long-term benefits will show. If most of your meals bury them in harmful contexts, the risks will grow. So the real secret is consistency. Your body does not measure health one day at a time. It measures the patterns repeated week after week, month after month. Tomatoes are a perfect example of how one ingredient can either support or sabotage depending on context. When given the right partners, they shine. When dragged down by harmful foods, they lose their power. The responsibility is in your hands, and that should be seen as an opportunity, not a burden. Every meal is a chance to take control of your future health, and tomatoes can be one of your strongest allies if you let them. Conclusion and call to action. What becomes clear as we continue to examine the evidence is that tomatoes highlight one of the most important truths about health. Disease prevention is not about a single ingredient, but about the entire environment in which that ingredient is consumed. When tomatoes are placed in the right environment, they become part of a network of protection that strengthens the body against cancer, dementia, and other chronic illnesses. When they are placed in the wrong environment, their strengths are muted, and the body is left exposed to the damage created by other foods. This reality explains why studies of whole dietary patterns are so much more reliable than studies that look at single foods in isolation. The body does not experience one nutrient at a time. It experiences meals as a whole system. Tomatoes are valuable in this system because they contain a wide variety of protective compounds. Lycopene is the most studied, but it is not the only one. Tomatoes also provide beta-carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin, and other phytonutrients that contribute to cellular defense. These compounds do not work alone. They interact with one another and with nutrients from other foods, creating a web of protection that is stronger than any single strand. For example, when tomatoes are eaten with vitamin E from nuts or seeds, the antioxidants reinforce each other, making both more effective. When paired with fiber-rich foods like legumes or whole grains, the release of their nutrients into the bloodstream is steadier, helping the body use them more efficiently. This is why meals built on a variety of whole foods are consistently associated with longer life and lower disease risk. The protective role of tomatoes is not limited to preventing damage. It also extends to supporting repair. DNA damage happens in the body every single day due to exposure to pollutants, natural metabolic processes, and stress. What matters is whether the body has the tools to repair that damage before it accumulates. The antioxidants and vitamins in tomatoes provide some of those tools. They lower the burden on cells so that natural repair processes can keep up. Over years, this difference becomes critical. A body that can repair damage effectively is less likely to develop the mutations and structural breakdowns that lead to cancer and dementia. A body overwhelmed by damage without adequate repair is far more vulnerable. Another factor that makes tomatoes so important is their accessibility. Unlike rare supplements or expensive superfoods, tomatoes are available almost everywhere, and they can be grown in many climates. This makes them an equalizer in health, a food that nearly everyone can incorporate into their daily meals. Their affordability and versatility mean there is no excuse to rely on processed, sugar-filled alternatives. When fresh or lightly cooked tomatoes are within reach, choosing them consistently, even in small amounts, can shift the long-term balance of health in powerful ways. Still, it is essential to confront the myths directly because misinformation spreads faster than truth. There is no credible scientific evidence showing that eating tomatoes with a specific food like dairy or sugar directly triggers cancer or dementia. Such claims are designed to grab attention without providing real value. What the science shows is subtler but also far more empowering. Tomatoes can lose their ability to protect when surrounded by harmful foods, and they can enhance protection when surrounded by healthy ones. The message is not fear, but responsibility. You are not at the mercy of hidden dangers in your food. You have the power to decide whether a tomato becomes a shield or a wasted opportunity. This perspective is particularly important in modern life, where convenience often dictates choices. Fast food and ready-made meals almost always use tomatoes in ways that diminish their value. From ketchup squeezed onto fries to pizzas dripping with processed meat and cheese, the tomato is present but powerless. The antioxidants are still there, but they are overwhelmed by the high levels of salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats that dominate the meal. When this pattern becomes the norm, the long-term risks rise. On the other hand, when tomatoes are used in their natural form, sliced fresh, roasted with olive oil, or simmered into a vegetable-rich stew, they become powerful allies in the fight against disease. Every study, every observation, and every piece of research points back to the same truth. Health is not random. It is shaped by choices repeated over time. Tomatoes are one of the simplest, most versatile foods you can use to steer those choices in your favor. They are not the whole answer, but they are a consistent and reliable part of the solution. Used wisely, they help create an internal environment where cancer and dementia struggle to take root. Used carelessly, they simply fade into the background of a diet that pushes the body toward illness. The difference lies not in the tomato itself, but in how you choose to bring it into your life. Conclusion and call to action. If you think about it, the power of tomatoes lies not only in their nutrients, but also in the habits they encourage when used wisely. They are foods that invite simplicity, freshness, and balance. A ripe tomato sliced onto a plate encourages you to eat it as it is without layers of additives. A warm stew made with tomatoes draws on the natural flavors of vegetables, herbs, and spices rather than chemical flavorings. These habits are not just cultural traditions, but health protective patterns that shape the way your body functions. Every time you choose a tomato in its natural or lightly prepared form, you are choosing to strengthen your body's defenses against the slow development of disease. It is important to understand that the enemies of health are rarely immediate. Cancer does not grow overnight. Dementia does not appear suddenly. These are conditions that build over decades, fueled by repeated exposure to oxidative stress, inflammation, and poor circulation. Tomatoes help to fight each of these triggers. Their antioxidants reduce the oxidative burden that can harm DNA. Their potassium supports healthy blood pressure, which in turn ensures steady circulation to the brain. Their phytonutrients calm inflammation, lowering one of the silent drivers of disease. But these benefits only become meaningful when tomatoes are a steady part of a balanced lifestyle. Sporadic use is not enough. Consistency is what transforms them from just another vegetable into a genuine protector of long-term health. The way tomatoes connect to the brain is especially fascinating. The brain is an organ that is rich in fats, and this makes it particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress. When harmful molecules attack these fats, the structure of neurons can be damaged, leading to memory loss and decline. Compounds like lycopene from tomatoes integrate into these structures, providing a shield that slows down this process. Scientific research has shown that people with higher levels of lycopene in their blood often perform better on memory and thinking tests compared to those with lower levels. This does not mean tomatoes are a cure, but it means they are a reliable defense that helps protect the brain as it ages. Pairing tomatoes with other brain protective foods like walnuts, leafy greens, and berries only amplifies this effect, creating a diet that sustains memory and clarity far longer. When it comes to cancer, the influence of tomatoes is tied to the way they limit DNA damage. Free radicals are unstable molecules that strike at the core of our cells, breaking strands of DNA and creating the mutations that may later develop into cancer. Antioxidants in tomatoes, particularly lycopene, act like shields that absorb these strikes before they cause harm. This is not just theory. Multiple studies have shown that people who consume tomato-rich diets often have fewer markers of DNA damage in their blood. Over years, this translates into lower risk. The message is not that tomatoes are a miracle cure, but that they are one of the simplest and most natural tools we have to reduce exposure to one of the earliest steps in cancer development. One reason tomatoes work so well is because they fit into so many different types of meals. They do not demand complicated preparation or expensive ingredients. They can be eaten raw, roasted, stewed, or blended. Each preparation highlights different nutrients and flavors. A raw tomato preserves vitamin C, while a cooked tomato enhances lycopene absorption. This flexibility means there is always a way to include them, no matter your taste or tradition. What matters most is choosing natural methods of preparation and avoiding the traps of processed versions. A tomato sauce made at home is a shield. A bottled ketchup loaded with sugar is not. The ingredient is the same, but the outcome for your health could not be more different. What all of this proves is that food is not just about calories, it is about information. Every bite sends a signal to your body, telling it to either build resilience or break down. Tomatoes send the right signals when they are given the right stage. They tell your cells to repair. They tell your brain to protect. And they tell your body to resist the silent forces that lead to cancer and dementia. These signals are subtle, but over time they shape the course of your health in profound ways. It is a reminder that the simplest daily choices often have the biggest long-term effects. So when you place a tomato on your plate, you are making more than a culinary decision. You are making a choice that echoes through your future. You are deciding whether your body will be armed with defenses or left exposed. You are deciding whether your meals will pull you toward disease or push you toward resilience. And the beauty is that this choice is always in your hands. By respecting the true nature of tomatoes and combining them with the right partners, you create a pattern of living that not only feeds you today, but also protects you tomorrow. Conclusion and call to action: when you begin to see tomatoes as more than a food and instead as part of a lifelong investment, their role becomes clearer. They are not just about flavor, though they bring brightness and freshness to any dish. They are about quietly working behind the scenes day after day to reduce the risks that threaten health as we age. This is the power of consistency. Just as small habits like brushing your teeth daily protect you from cavities, small habits like eating tomatoes regularly protect you from the invisible damage that builds up in your cells and your brain. These are choices that may feel small in the moment, but are life-shaping when repeated over years. Another strength of tomatoes is their adaptability. They can be found in cuisines across the globe, from Mediterranean dishes to Asian stir-fries, Latin American salsas, and Middle Eastern salads. This global presence shows how versatile they are, and it also highlights a key truth about healthy eating. It is not about following one rigid set of rules, but about finding balance in a way that fits your culture and preferences. Whether it is a simple tomato salad with herbs and olive oil, a stew with beans and vegetables, or a salsa with onions and cilantro, the principle remains the same. The tomato becomes part of a network of ingredients that all move your body toward strength and resilience. This adaptability ensures that you do not have to abandon your traditions to gain health. Instead, you can enhance your traditions by preparing them in their most natural, nourishing forms. The protective qualities of tomatoes also come from how they interact with the cooking process. Unlike some foods that lose most of their value when heated, tomatoes often become more powerful when cooked. Heat breaks down their cell walls, releasing more lycopene and making it easier for your body to absorb. This means that dishes like stews, soups, and roasted vegetables are not just comforting, they are also more protective for your health. Pairing these cooked tomatoes with healthy fats such as olive oil enhances absorption even more. This is why some of the longest living populations in the world consistently use tomato-based sauces and stews prepared with olive oil, garlic, and vegetables. Science has now explained what tradition has practiced for centuries. Still, none of these benefits can withstand the effects of processed foods if they dominate the diet. This is where people are often misled. They believe that because a sauce or ketchup contains tomatoes, it must offer the same protection as a fresh or cooked tomato. But this is not the case. A processed sauce loaded with sugar and salt can push blood pressure higher, disrupt blood sugar balance, and create inflammation. All factors that increase the risk of cancer and dementia. In such cases, the tomato becomes a silent bystander, unable to protect the body against the damage created by its harmful companions. This is why knowledge matters. Knowing the difference between real nourishment and disguised products is what allows you to take control of your health. When you see the evidence laid out this way, a pattern emerges that is both simple and profound. The foods that consistently protect us are whole, fresh, and balanced. The foods that consistently harm us are processed, artificial, and excessive. Tomatoes belong firmly to the first category, but only if we allow them to remain in their natural or lightly prepared state. They are not designed to fight alone against mountains of unhealthy foods. They are designed to work together with the nutrients from other whole foods, each one amplifying the other's benefits. This is the symphony of nutrition that keeps the body strong, sharp, and resistant to disease. What this means for your daily life is empowering. It means that every time you step into your kitchen, you have the ability to tip the scales in your favor. You can decide to prepare a meal where tomatoes shine alongside vegetables, grains, and healthy fats, or you can allow them to be drowned out in dishes dominated by processed ingredients. These choices are not abstract. They shape your blood pressure, your memory, your energy, and your risk of disease. They shape the way you live not only today, but also in the decades ahead. And the best part is that you do not need perfection to benefit. You only need consistency and a commitment to choosing better most of the time. When viewed this way, the tomato becomes a symbol of health itself. Simple, humble, often overlooked, but quietly powerful when respected and used wisely. It is not a superfood to be feared or worshipped. It is a partner in health that works best when treated as part of a larger team. By choosing it in its purest forms and avoiding the traps of processed versions, you are not just eating a fruit, you are writing a healthier future for yourself. You are investing in protection against the conditions that steal quality of life for so many people. And the beauty is, this investment is available to you every single day, waiting in your kitchen, ready to be part of your story. Conclusion and call to action. What makes tomatoes truly remarkable is how they teach us that prevention is not about extremes, but about balance. Too often people look for complicated solutions or miracle products when the answers are often right in front of us, growing from the ground. Tomatoes are one of those answers. They bring together taste, nutrition, and science in a way that is easy to access and easy to sustain. They show us that health is not about restriction, but about choosing wisely, combining the right foods, and letting nature provide what the body needs most. When we look at the evidence, it becomes undeniable that this simple fruit can play a major role in defending against two of the most feared conditions of our time, cancer and dementia. The connection to cancer prevention comes through several pathways, and each one reveals the power of consistency. Tomatoes reduce oxidative stress by providing antioxidants that neutralize free radicals before they can damage DNA. They reduce inflammation, which is one of the most powerful drivers of tumor development. They provide compounds that help regulate cell growth, reducing the chance that abnormal cells will multiply unchecked. This multi-layered protection does not mean tomatoes can guarantee a cancer-free life, but it does mean they make the conditions less favorable for cancer to grow. Imagine a fire trying to spread in a damp forest versus a dry one. The chances are very different. Tomatoes help keep the internal environment more like that damp forest where sparks are less likely to ignite into flames. The brain receives similar protection. Dementia is driven by a combination of oxidative stress, inflammation, poor circulation, and the buildup of harmful proteins. Tomatoes address several of these factors at once. Their antioxidants help reduce the oxidative burden that damages brain cells. Their potassium supports steady blood flow to the brain, keeping it nourished with oxygen and glucose. Their phytonutrients help calm chronic inflammation that otherwise erodes memory and cognitive function. When consumed regularly, these effects accumulate and create a brain that is more resilient to the slow processes that lead to dementia. The science does not suggest a cure, but it does suggest a shield that grows stronger the more consistently you use it. This shield is not created by tomatoes alone. It is created when tomatoes are combined with other protective foods. Olive oil, nuts, seeds, leafy greens, legumes, and whole grains all add their own defenses. Together, they form a system where each nutrient supports the other. This is why dietary patterns like the Mediterranean diet are repeatedly shown to lower the risk of cancer and dementia. Tomatoes are central to these diets not by accident, but because their properties fit perfectly into the larger system of protection. They are the threads that help weave together a stronger fabric of health. Contrast this with what happens when tomatoes are placed in harmful contexts.